Good morning, Tobago. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. And good morning to all of you who are joining us from wherever in the world. Uh, Today and at this time, it's a good time to listen out or to perhaps share the link, share the live, share the broadcast. Um, as today we are doing a press briefing to clear up a lot of inconsistencies in the space, to clear up a lot of untruths in the space, and to also clear up what I will deem some deliberate attempts to gaslight Fisherfolk into believing the wrong things. I have with me this morning the Secretary of Finance, Trade and Economy, Secretary Petal Roberts. I also have Assistant Secretary Wayne Clark, and we are also joined by the Director of TEMA, Mr. Alan Stewart. We also have out of the Department of Climate Change and Energy and Environment, of course, Mr. Linford Beckers. I also have here with us Mr. Derek Leith from the Oil Spill Relief Committee. And so the lady and the gentleman that I have with me this morning, they will assist me in going through all of the details. We are also going to put on screen all of the documentary evidence on screen so that the Fisherfolk can have an appreciation for the fact that the Tobago House of Assembly has been quite honest with them and have been very straightforward in terms of what ought to be expected, what happened, and how it will happen. I want to start, however, by pointing out that in February, when the oil spill started in February, that the Tobago House of Assembly had to mobilize immediately to respond to what was the single largest oil spill in the Tobago space in modern history. We have not had a single disaster of this kind where an extended part of our coastline, some 15 kilometers, were actually affected or impacted by the oil spill. The country itself had not had an oil spill of this magnitude in quite a while. And so we had to mobilize immediately. As we mobilize, I want to remind you that when my administration took office, we met as unspent, meaning monies that are left behind for any emergency and so on, $392,000. That's what we met as being there in the coffers as unspent there, $392,000. Since we came into office, we took a decision by the Executive Council that 5% of our unspent every year will be placed in a contingencies account. And that is to allow us to treat with emergencies, with disasters. So we have been very responsible in that regard. I want to also point out that at the time of the oil spill specifically, vote number 36, which is what we call extraordinary expenditure or expenses, that vote for that fiscal year had an allocation of 1.2 million. At the time of the oil spill, we had already expended from that vote approximately $830,000 from that vote. We had already expended. So it meant that we had an oil spill, but out of 36 extraordinary expenditure, we did not have a large sum there. Notwithstanding, we immediately started utilizing some $15 million to treat with oil spill expenses. And I'm sure you will recall that I came to you and I said, look, the Tobago House of Assembly will begin to utilize $15 million. We will pull from wherever we need to pull from and ensure that we provide that facility to treat with oil spill cleanup. I want to take some assistance from a clip that we pulled from the joint press conference that the Prime Minister and I did, where he explained what ought to happen and the kind of financial support we will get from the central government, because this is a matter that was unplanned for, and it would mean that the THA, the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Works, the Division of Infrastructure, OCS, specifically under THA, that we essentially would have had to utilize from monies allocated for other areas to begin to treat with the oil spill immediately. And so that there was a need for more or less a top-up to what we call Vote 36. So let's listen into that clip at this moment.
Central government will have to provide the THA with whatever support the THA needs, and also whatever we spend from central government, because as you know, the Ministry of Energy is involved, Heritage is involved, Ministry of Works is involved. They have their budgets that they'll spend from, and the THA is involved here in doing certain things, and we may have to hire other people to do other things. So these are extraordinary expenses not budgeted for, but the budgeting process in the Ministry of Finance will take care of that.
All right.
I thank you for that. So in other words, 36 extraordinary expenses or expenditure really caters for things that we just didn't plan. So just by way of example, when you get a house fire and TEMA responds and puts you up for 72 hours before health kicks in with some rental, that comes out of 36. When we had the floods in December in Charlottesville, remember Christmas 2023, on approaching Christmas we had just a strange weather event. The expenses for that came out of 36. So this was in the same fiscal year as the oil spill. So any unforeseen issue that comes as an emergency, 36 actually caters for that. Now, please note and please be reminded that when the oil spill happened, we didn't get any monies immediately from central government. So the THA, of course, looked internally and started pulling funds internally to actually treat with expenses. Now, in March, for the mid-year review, budgetary review that is, as Secretary of Finance, because I was still Secretary of Finance, I provided a request to the Minister of Finance for funding. And I just want to show you what that looks like. So let's pull that letter up, and you will see that that letter is actually dated the 27th of March, 2024. And it says in part here, the request is delineated as follows. The amount, 153.5 million, is very much needed to address the unforeseen costs resulting from the recent oil spill. The details and associated cost estimates are attached as Appendix 1. So we requested $153 million to treat with the oil spill expenses. Now, what are some of those expenses that we looked at? We looked at the actual cleanup and remediation costs. That's the actual act of removing the oily substance and the oily waste and carting them away. And that includes putting down the booms and siphoning the oily substance out of the water, transporting it away to Studley Park and elsewhere. We look at high level and heavy infrastructure and cleanup and waste removal. So we actually budgeted for waste removal as well. Lease and rental of infrastructure, materials and supplies. Mr. Stewart could tell you that we were getting supplies regularly from places like Almando's and Hardware's in the Tobago space. Catering of meals and refreshments. So we were actually providing meals for the workers daily, and not just workers, but the volunteers, because we in fact had in excess of 100 volunteers working across the space in different areas. So we were feeding them while they were volunteering. Marine support services and consultancy. So that also included the work done by people like ATFA, marine support done. We also looked at accommodation costs because we had to accommodate the experts that were coming into the island from wherever they were coming. And we also had volunteers that showed up from Trinidad and elsewhere that we accommodated. Security services at the sites. If you listened to me in the house yesterday, you will hear, as I pointed out, that it was difficult to get TTPS to really secure all our sites. So we had to use a mixture of private security from here on island, and also the Coast Guard provided some much needed security for us. And of course, any other services, compensation, payments, we looked at that. We made a request for compensation for Fisherfolk, actually. And that included the food support that was given at the very start of the oil spill cleanup activity. We looked at medical and healthcare costs because treating with oil spill, we expected some of our workers to get sick. And even as I'm saying that, we have a worker that by the time this was done, she ended up with a stroke, and now she is still in recovery mode. Environmental remediation costs, we looked at what we will have to do post the cleanup to repair our environment. We looked at legal and regulatory costs that we will potentially have to pay. Public relations and communication costs, because we had to communicate with you every week. You remember we had frequent press briefings, and we spoke to you sometimes 2-3 times per week, and it costs to telegraph those things live on television. I will tell you, television stations weren't giving us those things for free. We had to pay for those that to be televised. And we also considered fees for committees, consultants, and some sort of honorarium or gratuitous payments for the workers in TEMA, because we felt that the workers in TEMA, they were working extraordinary hours, and I told you about how one of them suffered a stroke post the event. But we wanted to, give them some honorarium as an addition to their basic salary. So all of that constituted the $153 million that we requested. What we got was only $50 million. I want to go slow. What we got was only $50 million. And when we looked at what was submitted to the Minister of Finance, that $50 million really reflected all of the invoices we had up until the 27th of March 2024. So it meant that if a company submitted an invoice later than the 27th of March, and we did in fact have collect invoices post the 27th of March, that those really and truly wasn't given in the allocation at the mid-year review. They did not even cater for the fact that we actually projected what the additional costs will be, because at the time of the mid-year review, we were still undergoing cleanup operations and very much expected that we will get some bills post the mid-year review. We budgeted for that. We projected those costs. We asked for that from the Ministry of Finance, but we only got $50 million. We also did not receive any of the requests that we made from the Ministry of Finance asking for compensation for Fisherfolk. We made a request, but that was not sent for the Tobago House of Assembly. What we see the Minister of Finance is trying to do now is say, well, when we give the THA money, the THA could in fact do whatever it wants with the money, which is true. When we get monies allocated for whatever reason, the THA can decide to vary the use and use it for something else. But this is an emergency, so there's no way we will vary the use. We have to pay the contractors. We have other costs to be borne. And soon I will ask the Secretary of Finance to go through every single expenditure we have had to date on this matter. But essentially, we only received $50 million, and that $50 million reflected the bills or invoices we had up to that point. And as a matter of fact, I recall Senator Hislop defending the giving of only $50 million and going as far as to saying that when he looked at the international cases with oil spill, that sometimes the expenses extend for years and years. And I actually have a news clip of that. So can we roll that news clip, please?
However, Senator Lawrence Hislop is defending Finance Minister Carm Imber's decision to grant the THA only $50 million to deal with expenses from the oil spill cleanup. Meanwhile, the government has received criticism for leaving out relief for fishermen in the $50 million allocation.
And so we can't just sweep it under the carpet that 50 million is not enough and we make a noise. That to me doesn't make sense.
Hislop also noted that from several other oil spill response efforts nationally and internationally, it might take a few years to resolve all financial concerns. Candace Jackson, Tobago Updates.
So in other words, Mr. Hislop is saying it didn't make sense that we were telling the Ministry of Finance that $50 million was not enough. Those were his words. I'll ask Secretary Roberts to go through the oil spill expenses that we have to date. And while she is going through those expenses, we will intermittently put on the screen, or at least towards the end of her presentation, we'll put on the screen what our expenses and what's outstanding, the summary of expenses and outstanding bills to be serviced, what those will look like. So over to you, Secretary Roberts, at this time.
Good morning, Tobago. Good morning to the media. I'm here as the Secretary responsible for finance, trade, and the economy to bring some transparency and also accountability and the realities that the THA face in light of the oil spill expenditure, and even on a whole, what we experience here in Tobago in terms of availability of financial resources to take care of both expenditure that we have catered for and also the unforeseen expenditure such as the oil spill. Before I get into what the Chief Secretary indicated, a statement of the expenditure regarding the oil spill, I'd like to also bring some context on our financial situation when the oil spill took place. The oil spill took place on February 7th, and about that time, the Tobago House of Assembly's fund account was in overdraft of $34 million. Also at the time, our contingency account only had about $2 million. So we had to activate because we expected that the central government would send additional resources to treat with this unforeseen circumstance. That did not happen, so the Assembly had to make a decision. The Executive Council in March of 2024 approved the transfer of $15 million from the unspent balances account, and this account caters for URP and CPEP payments. We had to reprioritize our resources at the time and shift $15 million from the unspent balances account to the contingency account to treat with the emergency payments under the oil spill. That process also included a due diligence exercise by the Multidisciplinary Oversight Oil Spill Committee, and there was a subcommittee of that committee that dealt with payments during the emergency phase of the oil spill. That $15 million was paid to 6 contractors, and this was after meetings with these 6 contractors explaining that the Assembly did not have the resources as part of its allocation, but we had to utilize contingency funds to treat with their payments. This committee, of which I was a part at the time as the Chief Management Accountant under the Office of the Chief Secretary, met individually with major contractors, and these were Tiger Tanks Limited, Kaizen Environmental Services Limited, Ambipar, the All Fisherfolk Association of Tobago, Tobago Marine Safety and Security Services Company, and the Oil Mop Environmental Services Limited. That meeting that we held, I think it was April 30th, was to first communicate with these major service providers, because these were the service providers that dealt specifically with the cleanup efforts, and they had significant costs attached to that exercise. We met with them to explain that we did not receive any monies from the central government, and therefore we had to mobilize the funds that we had under the unspent, under the contingency. We also indicated to them that we were only able to pay invoices relating to the emergency phase of the oil spill, which was about February and March period. We also went through the invoices with them to ensure that these costs were certified by TEMA, and Mr. Alan Stewart was also a member of that committee. We had a legal person, Ms. Trudy Carballo. We had Mr. Linford Beckles, who is from the Environment Department, as well as I said, myself, and a procurement manager, Mr. Dion McKean. So we all met with these contractors, and at the end of the meeting, we decided, and we got approvals and agreement from these service providers on how much would be paid. Tiger Tanks, they were paid $5,703,742.93. Kaizen Environmental Services was paid $1,616,566.50. The All Fisherfolk Association, they were paid $1,165,600. Tobago Marine Safety and Security was paid $660,200, and the Oil Mop Environmental Services was paid $732,273. We have one company, Ambipar. They were paid in, I think this is either US or pounds, because they came out of the UK. But the equivalent was about $4.2 million. And at that time, the total expended was $14.1 million. At the same time, though, we did shift resources internally. The Chief Secretary did speak about the vote 36. 36 is an appropriation, an allocation that treats with extraordinary expenditure. And the allocation for that, for the year 2024, the year in which the oil spill took place, was only $1.2 million. We had already spent $830,000 on other unforeseen circumstances for the year. So you can imagine we only had about $400,000 to spend. The THA shifted its resources and supplemented that vote in the amount of $1.5 million over a period of time. So I will now get into the statement of our situation with regard to the oil spill. Although the government only sent $50 million in June of 2024, we started to spend in February, and the total expenditure up to September from the vote 36 was $54,447,773.50. In this fiscal, we spent already $875,450, And I would also like to say that the extraordinary vote that treats with this in fiscal 2025, we were allocated $2.1 million, which treats with all unforeseen. So we have not even, I have not even included what we spent on other unforeseen circumstances, because this 875 only relates to the oil spill liabilities. Under the contingencies, in fiscal 2024, we spent $14,774,312.98. And in this fiscal, we spent $1,999,750. So far, we have spent $72,097,286.48, and we have only received from the central government $50 million. Our contingency account right now only has about $900,000 in the event of any emergency that takes place in Tobago. As the Chief Secretary indicated, he would like me to go through all payments of the $55 million, yeah?
Yes, please.
As well as those from the contingency account. So I'll begin. Tiger tanks, $15,428,042.39. Trinidad and Tobago Pilots Association, it's US $18,000 or TT $122,387.40. Nigel Henry for transportation, $17,750. Robinson Crusoe Beach Resort for accommodation, $27,055.05. Anthony Hosford, $6,000 for provision of materials during the oil spill. Independent store, $2,160. High Tech Scaffolding Rental Company, $15,500. Dean and Daughters Hardware, $16,800. Azul Car Rental, $44,600. Shufi Equipment Rental Limited, $192,500. Hummingbird Drone and Robotics Company, $28,687.50. C. Neptunus, which is, I think they provided emergency salvage divers at the time of the oil spill, the emergency phase, $78,750. Valance Plumbing Services Limited, $39,937.50. Legrand Corlan, $173,507. Rocktop General Services, $51,200. Cranium Agencies, $301,530.76. New Lens Limited, $140,410. Grafton Beach Resort, $809,325. James Trim for consultancy services, $80,000. Kaizen Environmental, $753,705. I'm sorry. Ambipar Response, $4,331,690.44. MI4 Security, $1,120,732.04. Belfonds Hardware, $300. Swimcall, $474,525. Tobago Hospitality and Tourism Institute, $27,000. Guys Exquisite Catering Services, $3,250. High Tech Scaffolding Rental Limited, $164,150. AVT General Services Limited, $724,021.92. Liqua Construction Services Limited, $4,791,555. Tobago Marine Safety and Security, $860,940. Oil Mop Environmental Services Limited, $1,676,847.38. Tobago Marine again. Tobago Marine Safety, Security and Services, $396,200. Aches Donil Catering Services, $18,900. Eves Catering, $15,600. AVT General Services Limited, $136,237.50. Sunshine Enterprises Limited, $14,250. Logan's Contracting and Transport Services, $126,000. Guy's Exquisite Catering, $18,900. Tobago Hospitality and Tourism Institute, $64,000. Penny Savers Supermarket, $19,473.09. Interchem Limited, $51,750. MK Express Deliveries, $2,060. Barcode, $2,020. Guys Exquisite Catering, $1,400. Jira Things, $4,200. Felicia Frederick, $1,200. The Tool Closet, $650. Red Coral Foods Limited, $9,402. Cherish Alfred, $12,950. Tobago Motor Services Limited, $675. Francis Auto Supplies Limited, $540. Almando's Hardware Limited, $22,056.82. The number one hardware, $540. And I continue under the same extraordinary expenditure payments. Cleaver's Classic Catering, $9,300. Frontline Flavors, $4,500. MK Express Deliveries, $8,000. Guy's Exquisite Catering, $16,800. Le Grand Corland, $49,445. Grafton Beach Resort, $574,200. Ravenel's Resort, $288,800. Aldi Tobago Limited, $23,897.50. Coral Foods Limited, $1,463. AVT Limited, $647,662.50. Logan Construction, $640,125. Rocktop General Services, $4,000. Dean and Daughters Hardware, $800. Ravenel's Resort, $94,400. Robinson Crusoe Beach Resort, $37,947.18. Paradise Store, $66,096.95. New Lens Limited, $103,460. AVT General Services, $86,647.50. Liquor Construction Services Limited, $137,445. Natalie's Catering, $560. And this is now for fiscal 2025. These are the payments we have made in this fiscal from the allocation of $2.1 million. Logan's Contracting and Transport Services, $240,750. James Trim, $40,000. Valdon's Plumbing Services, $4,500. Logan's Construction and Transport Services, $193,500. Tobago Marine Safety and Security Services, $276,700. Under the contingency, where we would have shifted $15 million from the unspent, Tiger Tanks Limited, and I will go through by the check payments. Tiger Tanks, $1,683,984 Tiger Tanks received another check of $4,019,758.53. The All Tobago Fisherfolk Association, a check of $641,200 and another check of $490,000. Oil Mop Environmental Services Limited received a check of $732,273.73. Viewport Supermarket, $1,320.75. Sings Hardware, $8,869.95. Downtown Electrical, $1,836.29. Viewport Supermarket, $1,151. Ferrycon Limited, $50,625. Trinidad and Tobago Pilots Association, $274,147.78. Tobago Marine Safety and Security Services, $552,000. Kaizen Environmental Services, $462,901.50. Again, Kaizen Environmental Services, $1,153,665. Ambipar Response, $4,140,443.53. AVT Limited, $123,525. Beards Rental Limited, $2,812.50. Swimcall, $144,900. Atches Donil Catering Services, $7,000. Sandra Brown Bakery, $2,548. MK Express Deliveries, $4,700. Eve's Catering, $7,000. Natalie's Catering, $14,700. Tobago Motor Service Limited, $225. AVT Service General Services, $123,525. Ravenel's Resort, $28,000. Swimcall, $98,100. And in this fiscal, we recently paid the All Tobago Fisherfolk Association by check number 34028 the amount of $1,999,750. And those were all the payments that were made by the Assembly in the amount of $72,097,286.48. We do have a balance outstanding of $4,895,294.20, and those are liabilities to the following companies: AVT General Limited, $170,203.70. Liquor, so I can't remember Liquor's full name, but the companies are Liquor Construction, $491,085. MI4 Security, $418,770. High Tech Solutions, $83,550. We still have monies outstanding for a consultant, $40,000. Azul Rentals, $30,000. Trinidad and Tobago Pilots Association, $11,880. Beards Rental, $812.50. Natalie's Catering, $2,520. Shufi Equipment Rental Limited, $64,600. Project Component Specialist Limited, $9,900. Project 5, $31,000. 3J Holdings Limited, $46,750, and the All Tobago Fisherfolk Association, $3,366,223. I would like to say, though, that there is a process of verification, And some of these outstanding were not completely verified. We still have also some outstanding invoice for Logan Construction as well as the All Fisherfolk that has to be verified by the Tobago Emergency Management Agency, which certifies the invoices as true and correct.
I thank you very much, Secretary Roberts, and thank you for taking the time, painstakingly so, to go through all of the 72 million plus that we have spent so far, and to also go through just over 4 million in what's outstanding and who they're outstanding to, and how much each is owed, and going through the fact that we still have maybe 1 or 2 invoices that we are waiting, and a verification process. So that should quiet the nonsense noise about where the 50 million gone, and about whether or not we took the $50 million and we went and fed with the $50 million. You will see we spent 72 million plus to date. So we have spent more than $50 million, and we still expect to spend a further $4+ million to treat with oil spill cleanup. And that 4+ does not include a figure for final removal of the waste at Stolly Park. Because no monies were sent for the removal of the waste at Stolly Park, we eventually just wrote the Ministry of Energy to ask if that's something they will do. It still has not happened or as yet, or it's happening, it's in the process. No allocation was given to treat with any environmental work that is required post the cleanup. So we have done no environmental work really post the cleanup. As a matter of fact, we should have gone to the wreck site and recover any debris that was left lying on the reef. But again, we're not engaging any services because no monies were sent for any of the post-cleanup work, right? Let me be clear. So we got 50 million for oil spill. We spent 72+ million. We have 4-point-something million still to be spent. And that does not even consider the post-oil spill cleanup activities that really and truly we should responsibly do. I want to go to Mr. Beckles now, who will talk about the committee that he chaired and the work they have done for verification of these expenses and doing a sort of quality assurance of the entire cleanup operations. I think Ms. Roberts spoke to the members of that committee, but I'll ask Mr. Beckles to speak now in detail about the work that they did.
Right, thank you very much, Chief Secretary. Let me say good day to the listening public in Tobago and those who are further afield. Pursuant to a request from the Office of the Chief Secretary, I was asked to chair the Tobago Multidisciplinary Oil Spill Committee. And as the name suggests, we had people with various expertise on that particular committee. While I'm not going to rehash by naming all of the members of the committee, I think I should probably focus on the kind of expertise that we had available to the committee. So we did have persons with expertise in finance and accounting, persons with expertise in environmental management, expertise in health, safety, and the environment, disaster management as well. It was also critical for us to have expertise related to procurement of goods and services. Public health, we had that kind of expertise there as well. And of course, it was very essential to have expertise in the legal field and of course, expertise in oil and gas engineering. So that's the full spectrum of the expertise that we had available to us on that particular committee. As the Chief Secretary suggested, one of the things that the committee was really tasked with is really basically providing general oversight to the cleanup process. This is not to say that we were intimately involved with the operations. That was being expertly done by the Tobago Management the Tobago Emergency Management Agency under the leadership of Mr. Alan Stewart. So we were not there to replace Mr. Alan Stewart or get involved in everyday operational activities, but just to provide general oversight. And of course, one of the things that we were responsible for in delivering that kind of oversight and so on was really the verification of the claims that were being made by the contractors. And of course, being a responsible entity, the Tobago House of Assembly wanted to ensure that there was proper accounting and so on in the entire process. So we were there to provide that kind of support. While we did have various expertise on the committee, we didn't just lean to our own understanding. Because we have to remember that for many of us, this was the very first time that we were experiencing this kind of emergency in the Tobago space. And we thought that it is always best to consult. So we did consult widely. And we would have received advice from ITOF, the International Tank Owners Pollution Federation, which has significant expertise in the management and the management of oil spills across the world. We would have also received advice from maritime experts and various other industry experts locally and internationally. So all of the expertise, those that were resident on the committee and those that were external to the committee, those expertise were essentially brought to bear upon the verification process in the context of the invoices and so on that were really submitted to us to ensure that one, the claims that were made and so on was really, the value of the claims that were made was really reflected in the kind of work that was actually done and so on. Secretary Petal Roberts would have referred earlier to in her remarks to the kind of interactions and so on that we had with the contractors, and specifically a subcommittee of that multidisciplinary oil spill committee, which comprised myself, Secretary Roberts, who was then performing a different role as the chief management accountant of the Tobago House of Assembly. Mr. Alan Stewart, we generally don't do these kinds of things without him. We had a procurement specialist there in the person of Mr. Dion McCain, and I don't know if I'm missing, and of course Mrs. Trudy Caraballo, who is our resident legal expert. So we would have engaged with the contractors. And our engagement essentially was really with a view to protecting the financial interests of the Tobago House of Assembly. And what I want to say is that as part of this process, we had significant negotiations. And I can say that the negotiations were not always very, very easy. All right, there was significant back and forth. But at the end of the day, we were able to secure significant financial concessions from the contractors, and that is also reflected in the invoices and so on. So I think on average we probably got savings of probably about between 8 and 10% on some of those invoices and that sort of thing. So that was relatively significant in the context of our financial bottom line in the Tobago House of Assembly. Remember that we were operating in an environment where financial resources were very, very scarce. I mean, at the best of time, financial resources are scarce in Tobago. And of course, at that time in particular, we were being stretched to our limits. Right? And I think that is something that is very, very significant for us to consider. Right? One of the things I would like to put on record is that the Tobago House of Assembly remains very, very grateful to all of the contractors for the service that they provided to us in Tobago at the time when we most needed it. And we remain committed to providing the support to our contractors and so on we remain committed to paying all our contractors for all of the services that they would have offered to us. And of course, those services have to be verifiable services, right? I would also just like to quickly mention the situation up at Studley Park. Of course, the committee was also tasked with coming up with final solutions for the disposal of the waste that was stored up at Studley Park. The committee did come up with a framework, and of course, this framework solution had significant financial cost attached to it. Obviously, we didn't have the finances to expend on that, and as a result, we were never able to actually start the procurement process and so on to be able to provide that solution and that kind of relief to our people in Tobago, particularly in the Studley Park area. Sometime, I believe, in June of 2024, the Tobago House of Assembly was formally approached by the Ministry of Energy, and they asked to take responsibility for the final disposal solution with respect to the waste at Studley Park. After some deliberation, the Tobago House of Assembly acceded to that particular request, and the Tobago House of Assembly gave that indication formally via letter from the Chief Administrator of the Assembly to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Energy. Since then, it is my understanding that the Ministry of Energy would have engaged the National Gas Company as their agent to essentially see about the final disposal solution at Studley Park. Consistent with this mandate, the National Gas Company has actually gone out to invite tenders. It is my understanding that all of the tenders have been received and that the National Gas Company is now in the process of evaluating the tenders that they would have received. Informally, it is my expectation that sometime within the quarter, that whichever preferred contractor has been chosen for to provide the disposal solution would be able to mobilize and so on, and that we should start seeing some activities on the ground. So that is where we are in the context of the disposal solution for the waste that is stored at Studley Park. What I would like to say, just briefly, in addition to that, is that the Tobago House of Assembly, we don't have an antagonistic relationship with the Ministry of Energy. The ministry has provided services during the oil spill, and they have committed to provide services to deal with the waste that is stored at Studley Park. And they remain our constant partners. But even in partnerships, sometimes we need to sort of I'd probably say encourage people. And what I would like to remind all of us about is the fact that while at this point we do not have any public health, any significant public health or any significant environmental concerns with respect to the waste that is stored at Studley Park, the longer they remain there, they could continue to pose some kind of risk. So while we are grateful and we thank the ministry for its support, we are going to encourage the ministry through its agent to act with a little more alacrity and so on to bring relief to us in Tobago with respect to the management of that waste that is stored at Studley Park. And with that, I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beckers, for being so detailed about the work you and the committee did, and the fact that all of these invoices were verified, were measured against international best practice, and also for speaking towards the waste currently being stored at Stolly Park and where that is at. And so interestingly, it's interesting that we hear from some political actors in this space claims as though we are being irresponsible with that waste, when in fact that's being managed according to international best practice. And in fact, it is their own political party and government that really has taken the responsibility for the final removal. So thank you very much for such a reminder. I want to go to Mr. Alan Stewart at this time. He chaired the Oil Spill Relief Committee, and we established this committee under the Division of Food Security to look at what sort of relief efforts we can actually make towards the fishers who were affected by the oil spill. So I'll ask Mr. Stewart to get into that, inclusive of indicating who were on that committee.
A very good day to all of Trinidad and Tobago, and most of our colleagues here in Tobago. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be able to express and to lay, facts before you as it relates to the response and also the work of the committee. As we are aware, on the 7th of February 2024, the Tobago would have experienced the effect of an oil spill, which resulted from an overturned barge, which we come to learn was Gulfstream. And that coined the operations Gulfstream that we will normally hear about, OJS 24. The oil spill, it must be put on record that the oil spill tier level was the first for the country. Bearing in mind that, in 1979, there was a spill again to the northeast of Tobago, which you would have seen or learned, for those of you who know the history, over 200,000 tons of hydrocarbon fuel that was released into the ocean as a result of the collision of these two tankers. It's important to understand that this oil spill in Tobago the incident had significant impact on the island fishing industry, particularly in the areas of Scarborough and Lambo. The event triggered several actions to prevent the associated effects, ripple effects as I will describe it to be, to assess the well-being of the affected fisherfolks. The Tobago House of Assembly did something remarkable, which was the establishment of a Tobago Oil Spill Relief Committee, of which I had to chair. This began on the 2nd of May 2024. So the members were comprised of myself as the chairperson. The deputy chairperson was Mr. Garth Otley, from the Director of Fisheries. Secretary, we had a secretary who provided the assistance in regards of clerical support for the committee, Ms. Alicia Jeffers Dinoon. Assistant secretary to that was Ms. Esther Tobias, again a research officer from DMRF. We had a legal attorney at law, Christine Moore was a member as well. Mr. Chrislyn Moore, sorry. Don't spoil the lady's name. Right, so we had Mr. Curtis Douglas, the president of ATFA, as a member as well, and also the other fishing discipline that I know, or association, which is TUFA, Mr. Dexter Taylor, the president. We also had the expertise of Mr. Derek Leet, senior policy analyst and of macroeconomics and policy. We also had Mr. Dominic Waljon, being a member of the committee, Ms. Kemba Hawthorne, who was the project analyst at DERT, and Dr. Mona Dillon, project analyst. Ladies and gentlemen, it's important for us to understand that the undertaking involved quite a lot. We would have had meetings, 27 weeks of meetings. These would have involved various activities, and I will try to get into some of the details 27 weeks of meetings, which involve consultations, and those consultations went quite well. We had 2 of those consultations with the Fisherfolks, which bear some results. It also involved the guidance of the IOPC, the International Oil Spill Contingency Committee. They were part of those consultations. It allowed for those persons who were involved in attending those 2 consultations, one that was held at the Food Hub and the other at the Shore Park Cultural Complex. They were in attendance, and it involved quite a lot in terms of how we went about looking at consultations and what it required. I must point out that the team meetings were very important in this regard. So the committee held its first meeting, as I indicated, on the 2nd of May. And thereafter, we reached for general meetings. We had 27 weeks of meetings, and we met on the first, we met on the Tuesday of every month. This was very important. It involved a lot of work in terms of the persons to look at the 176 claim forms that came in. 168 were deemed to be, prepared. And however, Mr. Leet later on will give some details in terms of that process and what it entails and what was the result coming out of it. It was important, probably imperative for us to have dialogue with certain expertise, such as the IOPC. They were parts of these discussions with the Oil Spill Relief Committee. The consultation with the Fisherfolks, to me, this was very important. We hosted 2 public consultations to ascertain certain of the Fisherfolks of the area, specifically Lambo and Scarborough. That was very important. The Food Hub was utilized, so these were held on Monday, 16th of July at 5 p.m. at the Shore Park Cultural Complex. And also we had on the 2 days after, the 18th of July, 2024. So these were the consultations that took place, and as a result of that, we were able to share and express with the Fisherfolks what was expected of them, what were expected of them to do in the application, the aid, and the processes that were necessary. And Mr. Leet will go into some of those details that were involved in these activities. Reports from the Fisherfolks Association, Department of Fisheries, prior to the establishment of the Tobago Oil Spill Relief Committee, Fisherfolks affected by the oil spill had interacted with relevant agencies, mainly us at TIMA, the Department of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, and the Fisherfolks, ADFA and TUFA. As a result of these interactions, Fisherfolks submitted relevant documents as evidence of damage caused by the oil spill. Another thing that will involve heavily, Chief, was site visits. It was important, again, imperative for us to go on the ground and see exactly what were the damages to these, the claims that were coming in. That was a natural process that we got involved in with the site visit. It was very necessary for us to do that in terms of the data collections that were necessary. So this was conducted, and also the International Oil Spill Contingency Committee were part of the team that went around conducting those exercises. Assessing claims were very, very critical. The ability or the availability of the claims forms was very salient. We make sure that those forms were made available both online, and also we would have given out hard copies at the consultation where persons were able to go through the process and to provide guidance to them in making their claims. To understand the contents of such documents, the committee explored the IOPC funds standard forms. We would have utilized those forms, modified to the point that it could have been used, they would have had zip code in their forms. We would have taken it out to make sure it was communicating effectively to the person or the claimants. So we did that. Focusing on the categories of fishing and the mariculture, that was very important. However, the Tobago Oil Spill Relief Committee adjusted certain aspects to capture the nuances of the Tobago context that was very critical in the undertaking. The adjustment, was important. The IOPC funds, it was clearly explained to the members or the claimants that, listen, you need to be very truthful. There was certain prerequisite that persons had the burden to undergo, in the sense that the burden of proof as a claimant rests with the person making the claim. In other words, you need to provide the necessary evidence that there were losses, and the due diligence was conducted to allow for that to happen. I must point out that 47% of the claims that were made were approved. Those were the approved out of the 168 claims that came into us. Only 47% of those claims were proved to be factual, and persons going to provide the necessary evidence to support those claims. I will pause here, Chief, and probably Mr. Leet will provide some of the details as to what influenced a proper claimant and with the right information and how the process went.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. We'll go straight away to you, Mr. Leet, so that we will look at specifically the type of claims we received and how those claims were processed, and some of the recommendations from the Oil Spill Relief Committee.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chief. Pleasant good morning to everyone in Tobago, Trinidad, and regionally, internationally. Thank you very much for being here. Let me just reiterate what Mr. Stewart has said, in that our claim forms was adopted from the IOPC, the international standards. So our assessment also follows based on the IOPC standards and so on. So what we did, we utilized the claim form. We excluded some very minor details, like for example, you have on the international standards, you have quotas by which you are allowed to catch only a certain amount of fish species per day. So we don't have that here, so that is one of the things that we would have left out, right? So that's an example of some of the things. But the IOPC forms is what we would have used in conducting our assessment. So we would have collected about 175 claims coming throughout the island of Tobago, and claims reaching as far as Tudley Park, Roxborough, Culloden, and even Palatovia. Persons from all over the island claimed that they were affected by the oil spill. So we took the claims, and it also included crab catchers. We have vendors, we have persons who operate businesses. So all of those individuals, whether you were affected in some form or fashion, were allowed to claim for compensation. So we received, according to Mr. Stewart, about 168 claims overall, which totaled over $47 million. The claim totaled over $47 million overall, all right? So our task was to go through these claims to identify who would be approved and who would not be approved. One of the things that I must state is that there's an absence, or there isn't any economic or econometric model that allows for the assessment of claims. This was also confirmed by the international group. So as a committee, we had to develop our model, all right? So what we did firstly was to determine whether or not persons were legitimate. And when I say legitimate, so you would have to have your documents. As a vendor, you must have a vendor's badge or a food badge or so. A fisherman will have to have his fisherman's license. If he's a boat owner, he must have his boat registration and all these different things. Right? So our first phase sought to determine those who were legitimate or not. So 44% of individuals were deemed approved based on our assessment. And some of the reasons why persons were denied include lack of documentation. There were a number of persons who claimed to be crab catchers or fisherfolk or so, and did not have the requisite documents, right? Which accounted for a large number of individuals. Also, we have persons who did not provide the necessary proof to show that they indeed were operating within the radius of the oil spill, all right? Additionally, we were in communication with the Department of Fisheries, where we communicated with the data collectors who would have contributed to identifying those fishers or who are active. Because as we all know, if you have your documents, that does not necessarily mean that you go to sea. So all of that was confirmed with the aid of data collectors, those who are active fishermen in the area. So we looked at all of those, and as I said, the list went down to 44% of persons who were approved overall. We had to make a decision additionally in that we had persons approved from all over the island. And whereas we, in our own thoughts, we would suggest that persons from very far may not necessarily come to Lambo to fish. However, if, as Mr. Stewart rightfully stated, the responsibility of the owners is on the fisherfolk or the vendor to provide that proof that you were affected, that you were operating within that area. I think it's 3 kilometers area around the oil spill area, right? So we did our analysis, and we soon recommended, based on certain criteria. One, the mandate that was given to the committee was to look at those persons, those areas, Lambo and Scarborough. Now, mind you, Lambo was fully compromised. Scarborough was partially, right? That was one of the things that we considered. In addition, we also realized that the oil spill, as I just mentioned, only affected those 2 areas, mainly. Lambo 100% and Scarborough partially. In addition to that, it is customary that if Fisherfolk cannot operate in a particular area, and there was no ban on commercial fishing, then they are free to go elsewhere. So we considered all of that. It is customary that fisherfolk, if they cannot access a particular area, then they will go elsewhere. Right? Also, there was a lack of evidence provided by fisherfolk as to the exact areas that they fish. So if you did not provide that evidence that you operate in that specific area, then we will not be convinced. You need to convince the committee, because the onus is on the fisherfolk to provide that burden of proof. So based on those about 5 areas, the mandate provided to the committee, the fact that the oil spill affected those 2 areas mostly, the fact that there was no ban on commercial fishing, that persons could have gone elsewhere, and the lack of evidence, the committee recommended that payment to those persons in Lambo and Scarborough. There were additional persons outside of those areas that were confirmed by Captain Andrew Taylor of the IOPC. He accompanied our committee in looking at the damage to the equipment, and he would have guided the committee in approving 2 individuals who were outside of that area, and they provided GPS evidence of where they actually fish. So as a committee, understanding that there is no economic model that exists, or econometric model that exists to deal with this, we had to develop a model for ourselves, and that model involves identifying those persons who are legitimate. Once you are legitimate, meaning having all your documents, then we would communicate now with the Department of Fisheries in order to ascertain, because there are certain fisherfolk that provide data to the Department of Fisheries. And what we did was we collected the sample of fishermen, or a sample of fishermen. Actually, we took all the fishermen between Studley Park and Buku. We calculated their average information in terms of the average catch per day, and also the average frequency by which they go to sea. So if any of these individuals claimed, we had exact numbers by which we could have compared the amount they would have requested. For those persons who, for some reason or the other, did not provide any data, we used that existing data from Studley Park to Buku, and we calculated an average catch per day and average frequency by which they go to sea. And we applied that to the other individuals who do not provide any information to the Fisheries Department. So the amount of the claims by individuals would have been guided by actual information that is housed at the Department of Fisheries. So in a nutshell, that is how we would have approved those individuals and the amounts that they were claiming, so it would be in line with what they would have, the information they provide. And for those who don't, then we would have calculated an average by which we would apply to all the others who, once you have not, or you were not provided enough proof or evidence of your average information so that we can compare that, the amount that you are claiming is in line with what actually happens, all right? So that, unless if the Honorable Chief requires any additional information.
Well, I think you actually did quite well, Mr. Leith. I almost call it Dr. Leith there. But I hope you are having an appreciation for the science that went into reviewing these claims for relief from the Tobago House of Assembly. So although we weren't given any monies to treat with compensation per se, we still did some work in assessing relief. And I'm sure you heard from both Mr. Stewart and Mr. Leith how international partners such as the IOPC and ITOF, how they came in and reviewed the process and was a part of the process. I'm sure you would have also observed that both the president of ATFA and TUFA, the two warring Fisherfolk Association, that they were also very much present at the table while all of these steps were being handled, were being taken rather, and also had an opportunity to give agreement or disagreement with those set steps. So they have been part of the process. There has actually been no curry favor to the extent that only some fisherfolk were at the table to have this discussion about relief. All fisherfolk from both of the associations were actually engaged, and they were actively members of this committee. One of those international organizations wrote to us, wrote to me specifically, and in December I shared that letter with the public. I want to read some excerpts from that letter again, because people are completely ignoring what was said in this letter and misconstruing what the facts are. So I wish to read this letter from ITOF again. I'll actually put it on the screen for us as well. In part, the letter says, whilst we are aware of and very grateful for the work conducted to date by the Tobago Oil Spill Relief Committee, we must strongly advise that if the Tobago House of Assembly chooses to compensate those claimants who have submitted claims to the Tobago OSRC with little or no evidence in support of claims and whose claims do not comply with the criteria contained within the 1992 Fund Claims Manual, we cannot guarantee that the THA would be compensated by the IOPC funds. If it submits its claims to the Ministry of Energy Industries subsequently. In other words, Mr. Leith just spoke about how some of the claims did not come with any evidence, and they're saying quite clearly that if the THA play mad and pay them compensation without any supporting evidence, that there are no guarantees that the THA will receive any payback or receive any funds for that. So that's the first thing I want you to note. So we're only working with those who have claims that can be substantiated. We have to treat this as a proper accounting measure. It can't be that anybody who pop up and say, look, I lose something, give me some money, that we just pay it. There must be some process to validate those claims. The second thing from the letter I want to read is this. Upon our preliminary investigations of the claims submitted by to the Tobago OSRC, specifically, we noted that 1, very few claims contained any supporting document or documentation to evidence the sums claimed. 2, some of the claims were involved, or some of the claimants were involved in paid cleanup work during the oil spill cleanup operations. 3, there was no fishing ban in place following the oil spill incident. And 4, many claimants already received the sum of TT $1,000 by way of compensation during the early stages of the response. All of these factors, we go to the next page, all of these factors, along with others, indicate that many of the claims have no substantiation for the figures being discussed by the Tobago OSRC as possible compensation payments. Accordingly, we strongly advise the THA not, and they put capital N, capital O, capital T, not to pay the claims as currently submitted, but to encourage fishers to submit their claims to the IOPC Funds Focal Point Office in Trinidad, thereby permitting the claims to be assessed in accordance with the established criteria contained within the internationally agreed 1992 Fund Claims Manual, details of which are available on the IOPC Funds website. So I want to explain that clearly to everybody. So we have been strongly advised by the IOPC to not pay compensation and to have the compensation requests all be passed through the Port of Spain office. And it's at this point I am publicly, or I did it before, but I am publicly directing Mr. Stewart as the head of that committee for the committee to sit down, pull those fishers, and to assist them in getting their claims into the Port of Spain office. We are not going to do like CAST and everybody else who pulling out their hand and don't want nothing to do with this. We cannot leave the fishers alone to submit on their own and hope that it's successful. The committee, you have the claims, you know what IOPC is saying seem valid and invalid, and I'm instructing you all publicly, find those fishers, call them in, and help them to get their claims made to the IOPC. They have a link on their website for submitting the claims. Get one of your officers, employ that teamer or elsewhere to sit down with them. If you don't have any officer available, write and ask that we provide one on short term, either from OCS, where you are hired Mr. Stewart, or from Food Security, under whose remit the committee operates. Get somebody to sit down with the fishers and to submit those claims. Walk them through the process. If there is a need to bring the gentleman operating the office for IOPC in Port of Spain to Tobago, the THA and the executive is willing to pay for his flight to come to Tobago, pay for his accommodation in Tobago, to have him sit down here with the fishers and to ensure that they get their claims to where their claims need to go. But it is clear that they are saying to us in no uncertain terms that they are advising the THA not capital N, capital O, capital T, not to pay the claims as currently submitted. They're telling us clearly in black and white, don't pay them as they are submitted. Because if you pay them, we ain't getting no money to recover those payments. So we will work with the fishers to ensure that the claims are properly registered with the IOPC. We will work with them in that regard. And please note the 4 things they highlighted. 1, many of the claims had no substantiating evidence or documentation. 2, some of the claimants are being paid for cleanup work. So if you're being paid to drive your boat through the oil as work, you can't come and claim compensation on the back end for that, because we are paying you on. When we look at your invoice, part of your invoicing takes care of the fact that you will experience loss of equipment while working during the oil spill. So we can't pay you for that on one end and then compensate you for it on another end. Thirdly, there's no fishing ban in place. So if you're from up in Palatavere and you are accustomed coming down Lambo to sailing down Lambo to fish, and for the period we say you can't fish in the Lambo area, well, sail go Charlottesville, sail wrong Speyside, go somewhere else and fish. There's no ban. The truth is, the entire island of Tobago was affected by the oil spill. And everybody affected by the oil spill can't come and claim compensation. I was affected. Everybody in this table was affected. The people who live in Lambo, who sleep in Lambo, they were affected. So it's not because you were affected in some way means that you are deserving of compensation. We have to be reasonable. Okay, for what? Couple months, couple weeks, you could not fish in the Lambo area. You couldn't access that area. That doesn't mean that you're deserving of compensation. You could fish anywhere else. Tobago have more water than we have land. I really don't understand it. And finally, they made mention of the fact that they are acknowledging that we, in fact, did the food support of the $1,000 very early in the game. So certainly they are considering that when they are considering all of the compensation. So again, to be clear, Mr. Stewart and team will call you fishers in and will go through those compensation issues with you. We will connect with IOPC's office in Port of Spain, get the claims in, and ensure that the Fisherfolk are on their way to getting their compensation for this from IOPC. It is clear that they want them to submit their claims for compensation directly to them and not through the THA, but directly to them. I hope I'm clearer than I was in December in stating that. I want to go to Mr. Clark finally. Mr. Clark represents the community that was 100% affected, which is the Lambo community. 100% affected. And we acknowledge that. We acknowledge that. And so, Mr. Clark, over to you.
A pleasant good day, each and everyone. Thank you, Chief Secretary. Thank you, the colleagues on the table. The only difficult part is going last. They usually use up all the words. But first, I want to say, at the beginning of this whole situation with the oil spill, very early on, I was the first person, as being responsible as a representative, I called the Fisherfolk together for a meeting. That meeting, there was both fractions were present, the ATFA and TUFA. And as the Chief Secretary said, well, it was unknown to me that they seemed to be at loggerheads with each other. I think ATFA actually walked out of that meeting. That meeting was kept in Lambo Community Center. And there was a follow-up meeting where the Chief Secretary chaired at the Food Hub. That was where coming out of that meeting, where we had the $1,000, the relief, because it was made clear to the Fisherfolk that we were not able or we were not in a position to offer you compensation. There were international bodies that was responsible for that. So that's how the $1,000 came about. The $1,000 was sort of food relief. The people were so badly affected that we thought it was responsible to actually try to help them put food on the table. So that's how the $1,000 came about. And there was about 100 people that were compensated to the tune of that $1,000. There wasn't only fishermen. There was people who were affected who did other things other than fishing, like who had a little shop on the side of the road, who usually come by and make a living there. Those who were affected, those people were in the 100 that got compensated. I could clearly remember that one thing I always emphasized with the fishermen, even in talking to them, even before the oil spill came along, that record keeping is really, really important. because if something to happen, is the only way you're going to get any kind of compensation. Because bear in mind that the people who will be doing the compensation is not myself, is not the chief secretary who might have knowledge that you does fish and you don't have no record. It's somebody who don't know you, so they will barely be going 100% on the information that you provide. So it's important to gather information. The Fisherfolk, the chief secretary mandated them to put the list together. That was for the $1,000. And run it by me. We could sanitize it, check on it, verify it, and take it in to fisheries. For some reason, that never materialized. When I approached the ADFA representative, they said they submit already. When I approached the TUFA representative, they said they submitted already. And if they submitted already, then it was fine with me. I stood there as an area representative. I tried to assist in the best way I could, constantly visited the cleanup. At one point in time, the chief secretary even asked me to have a hand in the boats that were taken up from the sea, what was affected with the oil, to have them cleaned off. Some were cleaned at Petty True, for systems that the THA would have set up. And some of the fishermen even got the assistance to relocate their boats in Boko, where they could have resumed fishing. So I was satisfied that not at the pace that things happen, but that there's a process that has to be followed in order for to see this thing through properly. And the committees were put in place, and I was satisfied to step back and allow the committees to do their work, which we are now seeing the findings of the works that the committee did. I remain committed as being the representative for particularly Lambo, that I could bear witness to the fact that it was totally devastated. Lambo was sort of wiped out. There was even a situation where one family had to relocate from the stench of the oil. So bearing all that in mind, I try to be there whenever someone calls. As the information comes to hand now, I'm probably relieved that relief is on the way. And I will continue to work with the fishermen as much as possible, as far as I could offer that support to see this process through. Not forgetting the fact that we continue, I as a representative continue to tell the fishermen, not only the fishermen, once you're earning a living by doing something, record keeping is important. It's a business, and it should be treated as such. In many instances, the people who are responsible for the compensation don't know you personally, so they will go strictly on the data that you supply. So I as the Chief Secretary just mandated Mr. Stewart and Mr. Leet to do what they have to do, their various tasks. As area representative, I make my office available, that if needs be that they need that kind of support, they need that space, the space is available, that we could bring some closure to this situation, as soon as possible. So again, the Lambo fishermen, I am there with you to support you 100%. I will do what is reasonable and what is fair and honest. I will stand by you for you to have the relief, the compensation, the support that you need going forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think Secretary Roberts wanted to do an intervention here as well.
Well, it was just a point that I wanted to make that I didn't make earlier in my contribution to this press conference. And it has to do with the $50 million. We are hearing, I think persons need to get clarity on what the $50 million was sent for. So when the Chief Secretary, who acted as Secretary of Finance at the time, when he requested at the mid-year on March 27th, the Ministry of Finance did reach out through the Office of the Permanent Secretary, asking the Tobago House of Assembly exactly what was expended at the time. And they also wanted to know what the oil spill expenditure was at the time that we incurred. We submitted to them what we expended at the time. Well, when I say expended, incurred, because some of them we could not pay. So how the Tobago House of Assembly operates, we have what you call commitments, where we will engage service providers and pay them later. And during the oil spill, this is what we had to do. So we submitted to the ministry at the time the expenditure incurred for the month of February and March, because this letter where we responded to the permanent secretary is dated April 17th, sorry. And the total of the bill so far was $47 million. And I just want to make the point that included in this was no compensation. So we're hearing the Fisherfolk, the two bodies indicating that they want their payments, but we did not receive any funding from the central government to treat with compensation. The payments were for cleanup efforts during the oil spill. Also, I'd like to make the point that at this point, persons will be asking the Tobago House of Assembly with a degree of predictability, when would these payments be made? I want to make the point that in the Tobago House of Assembly as Secretary of Finance, I cannot say when the central government will send our releases. We usually receive our releases very late and not in accordance with the law, and therefore it is very difficult at this time to say when these payments can be made. But this responsible administration has been making payments. We have put ourselves in an overdraft position. We have used up all our contingency resources, and we have been reprioritizing our activities to ensure that all these liabilities are taken care of. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Secretary. So there are two other things I wish to address before I take any questions from the media. And notice how lengthy this has been. Notice how much details we have shared with you. This is what I will get in a normal meeting if I was to call these individuals to a meeting. But I wanted to essentially have the meeting in full view of the cameras, so you can see where we're at, what has happened, what has transpired, and you can see in a very transparent way that the THA is not trying to undercut anybody, but the THA has been very responsible with how we manage this oil spill cleanup activity. So two things to address still. One, some of the claims being made by ATFA. And so the secretary did read out how much monies were paid to all service providers that accounted for the $72+ million. She also read out what the outstanding $4+ million will cater for. But I want to post specifically now ATFA's budgetary matters there, so you can look at it. So to date, we have serviced some invoices from ATFA, all to the tune of $3,130,950. That's what's paid. And I have there on the screen the invoice numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 12, 14, and 20. I have the dates of all of those checks. The dates of the checks received by ATFA were 17th of February 2024, 24th of February 2024, 4th of March 2024, 18th of March 2024, 25th of March 2024, 29th of April 2024, the 13th of May 2024, and the 24th of June 2024 as those check dates. Those invoice dates. That's the invoice dates, not the check dates. Invoice dates. Those are the dates that those invoices were submitted and those were paid. Bear in mind, I submitted as Secretary of Finance to the Ministry of Finance the 27th of March. And in April, they received invoices for up to that period from the THA. So naturally, you will see that there are some invoices that came in post the period when those invoices were submitted to the ministry. So as a matter of fact, when the ministry sent the 50 million or organized the 50 million, there were still outstanding invoices from ATFA that were yet to come in. So I just read out the invoice dates, not the check dates, but the invoice dates for those invoices that were paid, all totaling 3,130,950. And of course, you see in the spreadsheet the actual check numbers, right? Those what were paid. We still have outstanding to ATFA, and the Secretary mentioned it a short while ago, $3,366,223 outstanding for ATFA, and you have those invoice numbers there. Invoice numbers 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And part of the process is that these invoices have to be verified. So this is what we owe them based on the claims made by ATFA for work done. But remember, we have a committee being led by Mr. Beckers. And for every invoice, including those large ones like Tiger Tanks and Kaizen and so on, every single one of them will go through a verification process that also looks at what the international market rates are for those kinds of services and the relevant negotiations, right? So in essence, that's what we owe ATFA. I also want to be clear to TUFA that there was no favoritism in ATFA being contracted to do some of these works. I want to ask TUFA publicly, are you OPR registered? And I'm sure the answer is no, because at the time of the oil spill, there were only 2 companies resident in Tobago so registered. We had ATFA OPR registered, and we had Tobago Marine Services, I can't remember the full name, Security Services, Tobago Marine Security Services. Those 2 marine-based companies in Tobago were OPR registered. ATFA would not have received any payments if they were not OPR registered. So, TUFA, I will strongly advise you to become OPR registered. Please become OPR registered. Further, I want to go on record on clarifying a statement made by the Secretary of TUFA, who claimed that she was here sometime in December when I had the press briefing. On that date, when I checked with the office on that date, when you were here, I was not in office. I came from meetings outside of the office, came straight into this very studio that we're standing in, just a different backdrop, and I made the presentation. You perhaps had probably left by the time I finished the presentation. By the time you came here, I was not here. We didn't have an appointment. We didn't have an engagement before. You showed up. I was not here at the time you showed up. I showed up sometime afterwards, had the press conference. By the time I'm done, you were no longer here. So there is no sense of not wanting to meet with you why we did not meet on that day. As a matter of fact, I came to the office this morning. I met people here who have no appointment. And I'm sure they're somewhere in the building waiting on me. I have to find some time to see them in between all the other stuff that are scheduled for me to do today. So I want to make that clear. With regards to the $2 million, I want to make clear what that is for. And I want to make it clear in perhaps the most layman term properly. That is the THA essentially saying to the fishers, let me get something to hold while you go through the process with IOPC. In other words, we can't determine for the IOPC how their process will work or how quickly they will be able to give you the compensation. But we appreciate that you need some help out immediately. So, while Mr. Stewart and team are helping you to get your claims into the IOPC's office in Port of Spain, that $2 million is being made available to provide assistance. That's not compensation now. Assistance, so that the recovery, your recovery rate will be sped up. Now, in terms of timeline, the Secretary of Finance has advised that those payments will be made in the month of February. We will make those payments in the month of February. Mr. Leith already indicated that 44% of those claims that came into the Oil Spill Relief Committee are deemed as valid, and so we are going to focus on those 44%, those who fall within the category of 44%. So it is not a case that just because you submitted, we're just going to pelt money at you. No. Those that were verified as being valid, those will be the ones who will benefit from this $2 million. And it will be done in an equitable way, meaning that at the same percentage point across the board, all of the valid claims will receive some support while you wait on the IOPC. And that is because the IOPC is clear that we should not pay any claim that does not have the requisite documentary evidence. Finally, before I take questions, I want to say this. You know, I grew up with fishermen. I was raised by fishermen. So I am very much accustomed to fisherfolk, how they operate, the language they use. I am accustomed to their tactics, the techniques. I am accustomed to how they negotiate because I was raised by fisherfolk. I always say that Jesus had to be the savior to have four, not even one, but four, as among his disciples. So I understand how fisherfolk operate. So I can't be bullied and I can't be roughed up. I understand. I represent fisherfolk and I represent some of the most successful fisherfolk on the island. The most productive catch area is Palatavere. And I'm sure if I got Palatavere right now, me and them will have some of the same kind of tough talk because the depot ain't finished and they will tell me some choices. I understand how fisherfolk does operate. So I'm saying that to say that there is no love lost. I love all the same. All the same. Don't think you could bully me. I love you all the same. Right? And I understand that in moments like this, it requires leadership that is forthright and that will also point you in the right direction when you are heading in the wrong direction. Because if you want to stand in the public square and tell Tobagonians that those $47+ million in claims are valid and that we should just pay it, that cannot be reasonable. The rest of the Tobago population not buying that. And if we only receive 50 million, are you telling me we should just pay you 47 point something million out of that? The rest of the population can't agree with that. And if we only receive $50 million, the priority must be servicing the actual contracted works done. The priority can't be paying relief first and then paying the contractors afterwards. Because the priority had to be removing the oily waste and the oily substance and the oils from the coastline. That had to be the priority. So imagine if we had prioritized just paying the relief, but not contractors. Oh no, we have oil on the shoreline. And you still will not have been able to utilize your spaces in Lambo and Scarborough. And you would have been marching around this building protesting because you find it taking long to do the cleanup. So we had to prioritize paying the service, the contracts for service. That's what we had to prioritize. That's just the reality. The $2 million will be made available in February. We are also making the committee available to guide you with your claims and getting the claims into IOPC. And Information Division will, subsequent to this press engagement, will actually put out the dates. We will communicate with the Fisherfolk. Area Rep Clark will assist us in getting to you as well to ensure that everybody here and everybody present and that they make the claims where the claims supposed to go. While that is being processed, we are going to give the assistance of the 2 million in total. And I hope you appreciate that going past the 50 million means that we are actually saying as a government that there are some things that we would like to do, especially on the development side, that we're not going to do because we're prioritizing ensuring the industry is back up and running. Please don't allow people to gaslight you into shoppiness. Please, right? So let's take any questions. Candice Jackson's hand is up.
Good afternoon, Chief Secretary, and to the rest of the panel. My first question is, taking into consideration everything you said about the documentation needed for claims and that sort of thing, are you at all concerned that there are legitimate fishermen out there who, because they do not keep proper records, that they might be adversely affected by this whole thing? And is there anything that you're prepared to do about it after, let's say, the other claims are settled?
Well, yes, certainly. Listen, I have an appreciation for how Tobago works. And part of how we work is quite informal, right? So the first step has to be treating with things on a very formal platform and providing help. I'm sure you might have heard Mr. Lee talk about the fact that for folks who could not give somebody verification, how we went ahead and pulled the data from Studley Park to Boko and look at what the average catch looks like, the average income looks like, so that we could work out averages for people who don't have some of that documentary evidence, but who we know for a fact operated out of Lambo. So it's not that they won't be compensated, they actually would be compensated. We have gone above and beyond. We did not just say, okay, you have a boat in Lambo, but you have no real documentary evidence of how much your catch does be and all of that, so we ain't compensating you. No, that's not what we said. In fact, we have gone above and beyond to create a matrix by which we could actually help you calculate what your loss of earnings would be so you can be justly compensated. So even for those people that you have described, Ms. Jackson, they in fact will be helped by us to get their claims into IOPC in a way that will ensure that they get their compensation. If after that they still did not receive their compensation, then the THA will be left with no choice but to assist such individuals. Because we understand how a fishing community operates. So we're not casting them out and say, absolutely not. But what we are saying though, is that we have seen claims that come from places far removed from Lambo, where people had not a single piece of equipment in Lambo. And we are saying that we just can't honor those claims. We really just cannot honor those claims. And I also want to extend the point by saying this. The fishing community, like some other sectors, operate in the informal sector, what we call the informal sector, which means that the taxes that an ordinary businessman will pay, you are not paying them. However, money is collected by way of taxes. We have to use that today to ensure we help you out. So I hope you understand how in the broader context, you are benefiting in a way that you have not contributed towards. And it's not to make you feel bad, but it is to show that sometimes when taxes are levied, it is not to be unfair on you. It's so that we as a society will always have something in the kitty that we could give back to you. It is your money. It is your money. This is taxpayers' money that we are dispensing to you and paying to you. And so I understand why fishers might be reluctant to keep records, because if you keep records, somebody someday might come and say, well, you might have to pay some taxes on your catch and your sales and all of that. But I'm saying it to you, you should not be afraid of that. Because in moments like this, the taxpayer becomes your insurance policy. Don't be afraid of it. Yes, Ms. Jackson?
All right. And then in regards to some of the fishermen who claim that they might have encountered oil in other parts of the island, because, I mean, as you can understand, I mean, this happened in the water and currents took some of the oil to different places. Some said they have video evidence of that. And then some said that, you know, not being aware of just where all the oil is, they might have accidentally went through patches of oil, got their vessels, their equipment messed up in the oil, but they are not able to access the compensation, or they're not sure whether they will be able to access the compensation, even after the initial February period.
Right. So to answer that question, two things. One of the reasons why we had frequent oil spill pressers, and I remember at one press briefing, I remember the media asked me how I was doing, because I was at the meeting, eyes red and swollen, almost falling asleep on myself. But we went through great pains to do that 2-3 times a week, because we wanted the opportunity to share with you the images, the videos from the reconnaissance that we will do daily. So every single day, as a rule, we could account for where the oil was in Tobago waters and even outside of Tobago waters. We utilized drone technology. We had reconnaissance being done by the Air Guard, utilizing helicopters, and we utilized satellite imagery. So it is very easy on our part to verify if, in fact, a fisher found themselves in an area where oil was and got damage to their equipment. Also, if you got damage to your equipment, then it is easy for a technician to verify that the damage to your equipment came as a result of that oily substance. So that is actually verifiable, and payments can be made in that instance. And that's the reason why we operated the way we did during the oil spill cleanup. And you know, I don't know if Tobagonians have an appreciation for the kind of work the people in the oil spill cleanup did. Tobago, you should be proud of yourself. You should be proud of yourself. Don't take it for granted that we did in 3 months what the rest of the world told us will take 6 to 9 months to do. Do not take that for granted. Do not take that for granted. And that's why I hold no beef with the fishers, you know. Right? As the song says, in a good spirit right now. I want to beef with the fishers, because I appreciate that the work that the fishers who were contracted by ATFA did. I am appreciative of the work that the marine pilots did. I'm appreciative of the divers. When they were telling us it's unsafe to go under the boat, we had Tobago divers. And I want you to understand this. You know, when we had divers coming from around the world and from Trinidad, and telling us, nah, we can't dive under that vessel, the vessel bobbing up and down, and it's too dangerous. We had divers from Tobago going down there and coming back with video evidence for us. Ask Mr. Stewart. Tobagonians should be proud of what we were able to do with this. This is one of the best examples of disaster management you could see anywhere in the region. Second to none. Second to none. And what I don't want is that on the back end of this, after all this great work, we are encountering a lot of noise in the space that are really needless, really and truly needless. And so I will make myself available as well to meet with the fishers and, well, really their association if needs be. And I understand the politics of fishing in Tobago, you know. Some under ATFA, some under TUFA, and if ATFA gets something, TUFA feel they should get it too. If TUFA get it, ATFA feel they should get it too. I represent Castara, and right now if I go up Castara, you have about 2 different fishing associations in one small village. And I have to be responsive to both of them and treat both of them with respect and treat both of them with equality, right? And right now I have both of them costing me because both of them feel them should have get money long time. But I have a duty on behalf of the government and on behalf of the rest of the people of Tobago to ensure the accounting processes are straight, to ensure that the matrix used to calculate whatever help we give is actually legitimate, to ensure that the claims being serviced are legitimate, and to not just take money and throw it out just because people say we have a claim. And you'll vex with me for a while, you'll cost me if you want, but I'm saying this is what has to happen. These are the steps that we will take because we are a responsible government. And you know what is sad? I am hearing nobody joining me in making noise with the central government and say, why you only send 50 million? Why in the budget that was done in October, you didn't send a second set of allocation to treat with oil spill? I hear nobody making noise to that. I hear nobody querying the fact that we were only given 50 and we spent 72 plus and looking to spend up to 76 million to satisfy these claims. And I want to tell TUFA that the monies ADFA receive, those are not compensation. I heard Mr. Douglas saying that he using the money he receives as compensation. That is their business. As far as the THA is concerned, we pay on invoices. We pay on invoices, and I listed out the invoices that were already serviced or paid for. And we have some other invoices that are going through the verification process for payments as well. When we are through paying on those invoices, we are through paying any money to ADFA. The 2 million that will be given in relief will be given to the fishers directly. They won't be given to any association to then give to any fisher. So TUFA, please disabuse yourself of the idea or the notion that ADFA receives some large sum unfairly to you. And the only reason why ADFA worked and you weren't called out to work is because ADFA is OPR registered. I remember when this OPR thing came in, I said NGOs should go and get registered as well. Only listen to me. Opportunity came in a crisis, and everyone was not ready to maximize those opportunities. I'm seeing that again, Ms. Jackson.
Yes. What guarantee? Because I know that there are some fishermen that are out there that are really unsure about this situation in terms of being able to get the compensation from the IOPC. What guarantee can you give to them that if they just follow through with the process and they work with the THA, that they will in fact get some level of compensation?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of IOPC, but I've gone to the extent of advising Mr. Stewart that he should get to the Port of Spain office, get the IOPC resident officer to return to Tobago. I am willing to pay for the expenses of the officer to be in Tobago so that he could be in the very presence of the fishers, go through this thing with them, because essentially the fishers have the backing of the THA. You have the backing from the THA. So we're not sending you out there alone to IOPC. We're going with you. We are going with you. And I've also stated that although the claims were made to ITOF out in the UK and the Minister of Energy went to the UK, the THA was never a part of those conversations. We can't even tell you how much ITOF decide to give, when they will give it, or if they have even given it. For all we know, they could have probably already received the money and have it sit down in Trinidad. I don't know. We have no guarantee that any of that will come back to the THA because we have not gotten any such indication from the Minister of Finance or the Prime Minister designates. We haven't gotten any such information. So we work with what we know, right? The fishers have our backing, and we are going to assist them there. But you will appreciate that we can't jump ahead, pay compensation, and then IOPC on the back end also wants to pay compensation to the legitimate claims. We have to go IOPC first, and the THA acts almost as an insurance, as a supporting agent thereby. Yes, Ms. Jackson?
Yes, and finally, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the oil spill. And I just want to get your thoughts in summing up this year and being able to respond to it? What has it taught you? Just some thoughts.
Thank you for that. Currently, Information Division with an external partner is actually working on a documentary concerning the entire oil spill because we want to cement on record what Tobago did in the midst of a crisis. For me, the biggest takeaway point from this crisis is that Tobago has the ability to go through hell and come away with a slice of heaven. Nothing will faze us from being able to achieve that Tobago dream of having the greatest little island on the planet. Easily, if this was not managed properly, we could have easily decimated the island's economy from just one oil spill. And I'll just give an example. I remember the first major briefing we had, team meeting we had up at the office in Fairfield Complex. We're meeting for the first time after getting the report. So we got the report. The day we got the report, we did a press conference. The day after, the day after we were meeting. And when we sat there in the meeting, we realized, we said, shucks. Remember, Mr. Stewart, this oil getting to the port. If the oil get into the port, the boat car sail, cargo car come and go, people car come and go. You know what we did? We went down on the port in the night. We carry our own lights from TIMA. The lights was cutting on and cutting off because we had some technical difficulties. We there, some of the same fishers, right, showed up. The same Mr. Douglas, Mr. Kwashe, and a couple of them showed up. The marine pilot showed up. We had somebody from Kaizen who had some booms being stored down someplace by Almando's, was being stored for Shell, did not belong to the THA. But we almost commandeered those booms. Right? We didn't even pay for them booms. We gave no commitment to pay for those booms. We literally take the people boom and say we need them. We have to protect the port. And in the middle of the night, we were putting down booms to prevent oil from getting in the passageway for the large vessels. That one example showed you that Tobago has the capacity to actually respond to almost anything. And it is time to be going and stop doubting themselves. Stop doubting your ability, especially with this autonomy question. Stop questioning whether you could make it on your own, whether we could do it. We have the capacity. Is Mr. Stewart that essentially chaired the operations of all of this? Yes, the Ministry of Energy came. Yes, Heritage came. But I could tell you they came and they subjected themselves to the leadership of Mr. Stewart. And every single evening without fail, we were having a briefing down at the site in Scarborough on that tent. And they were coming every evening, and I would chair those meetings every evening and get the updates, and we will organize for the next day and so forth. This just shows that Tobago has capacity. We may not have all the resources we want. It's when it comes to the human beings on the island of Tobago. We're smart, we are talented, we are strong, we are resilient, and we have the capacity, the human capacity to respond to anything. Stop doubting yourselves, Tobago. We can absolutely do it. We can absolutely create the greatest little island on the planet. I want to say thank you, members of the media. Thank you, members of the panel. Thank you for those who took the time and stayed throughout this broadcast. I appreciate it. It was mightily long, but much needed. We will have Information Division pick it apart in pieces and we post it in pieces so that you will have the benefit of being able to look at varying segments on their own. Fishers, look out for a call and begin to organize for your compensation in that way. I indicated that as Chief Secretary, I feel no sense of hatred or bitterness or even anger at some of your claims, notwithstanding how outlandish some were and how misconstrued some were, and I'm putting that nicely, or how inaccurate some were. And I'm still very much willing to meet with the associations. I understand the politics among you guys. So I know that I might have to meet with you all 2 different times, right? As opposed to together. Tobago too small for that, to be honest. But it is what it is, and we will manage it going forward. I wish you a safe weekend. Keep safe, and God's richest blessings.